Good morning, everybody, and a very warm welcome to this session of the Value Awards 2020. I am Satish Aikant. I have been a student and teacher of literature for over 40 years and have occasionally written on matters relating to literature and contemporary culture. Well, the virus has forced us to this virtual retreat, but I think this is the best we could have done to connect with the world of arts and letters. This session, which is titled The Moral and the Immoral, Existentialism in Translation, is devoted to translations of creative writing. We have two distinguished writers, translators on this panel to talk about their translations from two major languages, Indian languages, Marathi and Malayalam. We do not have the original authors here, but I think their translators are in a sense their alter egos and can also speak for them. Let me first introduce Mr. Nadeem Khan to you. Mr. Nadeem Khan is an academic. He was professor of English at Shivaji Science College, Amravati, where he taught for 37 years. He taught feature writing and communications theory at the Department of Journalism of Nagpur University. He is the founder director of the Western Regional Center of the Indian Institute of Mass Communication, run by the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, Government of India. He has been a resource person at various academic programs. Along with all these professional obligations, he has been actively engaged in translation work and has translated a number of books from Marathi into English, as also from English to Hindi. Prema Jayakumar is from Kerala and was educated in Kochi and Bengaluru. She joined the State Bank of India as a probationary officer in 1975 and quit the service in 1995, presumably to become a full-time writer, which is all the good for us. She is both a translator and a creative writer and has 18 works of translation to her credit, published from prestigious publishing houses, some of which were also shortlisted for literary awards. Her translations of Yakshi was picked up by BBC for the Off the Bookshelf. Her book, Pandavapura, has been made into a movie in Malayalam as well as in Bengali. She finds the Puranas as an infinite source of interest and has written retellings of several mythological books. She has reviewed books for the Mathrubhumi Weekly and writes a literary column for the New Indian Express. Let me now begin with Nadeem, who can tell us about the book that he has translated, and he will also give us some notions about his testament as a translator. Let me show you the book that we are discussing here, The Story of Being Useless, Three Contexts of Writer. This is a book that Nadeem has translated from Marathi. I hope this cover can be seen here. So Nadeem, can I turn to you now?
Thank you very much, Satish, for the wonderful things that you've said about us. Thank you very much, Prema. I set the ball rolling. As it happens, that I'm neither trained in philosophy nor have I really trained in translation. And existentialism, I believe, is a rather heavy term with rather strong and very extensive connotations. And so are issues of morality and immorality. Now, frankly, since I began translating as a professional, maybe a dozen or so years ago, I do not remember having run into either any existential dilemma as a translator, nor nor did I run into any moral crisis worth registering. So it's only now when I've been asked to get into a discussion on this topic that I have to look back and dredge out occasions where I posed questions to myself. So this is how far it goes about the existentialism issue as a translator for me. But Satish, since you have also said that we can very well be mouthpieces for the writers that we have translated, without a doubt, the book that you showed to us, it actually has two very small novellas. The first is in the original Marathi, it is called Swatahala फालतू समजण्याची गोष्ट, which translated into English means the story of being considered as useless. And this is all highbrow existentialism. Here is this person who is finding out what he is that he wants to do, how it is that he can consider himself useful, and then he looks around the world and he finds that there are any number of people who are just about as useful or useless as he is, and they do not suffer from any such question of finding a rationale uh, for being what they are. And towards the end, the writer more or less decides that because he has this issue of feeling useless, the best thing that he can do instinctively is to write. And that is how he turns himself into this profession of writing. So deeply existential, but this is the book. This is the writer. This is not the translator. All I had to do was to transform it into, decent English. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Before we uh, do some conversation with you regarding the title, the title that you have chosen is, in fact, this is the title which was, could you tell me what is the title given in Marathi by the author?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. It goes like swatahala. Swataha means yourself, oneself. Swatahala phaltu samajhne. Phaltu is useless. And gosht means story. So the title is Swatahala Phaltu Samajhण्याची Gosht, the story of considering oneself as useless. And this is the theme that he begins with, and this is the theme where he ends in the first story. The second is again, the writer exploring himself, trying to find out his roots, trying to find out his anchors. And so the second title is in Marathi, it is called Eka Lekhakache Teen Sandarbh, the three contexts of a writer. So it is these three contexts that he identifies and elaborates on, from where he thinks that he uh, uh, got his sense, got his moorings of being a writer. So the first book and the second book are really a part of the trilogy. The third book, the third of the trilogy is yet to be published, but the publishers thought that these two made for a good composite reading.
Yes. Yeah, I really find that very interesting. The being useless, because that also
Yeah.
applies to the art in general. And often we consider
Yes.
literature or the humanities to have no instrumental function or no usefulness.
Yeah.
But then, since
Yes.
they are deeply implicated in our lives, and they are very,
Yes.
very humanizing and humanistic enterprises, I mean, they certainly have a value of their own, and therefore they
Yes.
have quite a meaning in life. They are very, very meaningful. In that way, I think they are very, very functional. The arts can be
Yeah.
very,
Yeah.
very utilitarian that way because they are concerned. And since you talked about
Yeah.
existentialism, and Sartre is
Yeah.
also maintains that existentialism is humanism. So, as humanism, it is
Yes.
not something which is denial of life or finding the sign
Yeah.
of a meaninglessness in the life, or not absurd in
Yes.
that manner. Because one of the sections of the book, I believe, we have also uh, dedicated to Camus, right?
Yeah.
You also quote
Yeah.
Camus at certain places. And
Yes.
Camus
Yes.
also
Yes.
thinks that life is not actually meaningless, because in the midst of
Yeah.
everything, in the midst of all the turmoil, in the midst of all the tensions, we can discover a certain meaning and purpose in life, and that is what
Yeah.
really makes it very, very meaningful to us. But before we discuss that
Yeah.
any further, I will turn to Prema, and please tell us something about your book and the circumstances in which it was taken up by you for translation.
Let me thanks Dr. Satish. Let me first thank the organizers of the literary festival for inviting me to the seminar, a get together of writers, including translators. It is a little disappointing that we cannot meet each other in person and that in scenic Dehradun, but must hope for a better time when we shall be able to do that with impunity. Now that introductions are over and you know what work I've been doing, let me talk a little about it. My co panelists are eminent academicians and used to holding an audience for hours. I'm not used to talking much about my work at all. I'm also at a disadvantage in the sense that since I'm not an academic, I don't really know the theories. I'm only a practitioner. We had this old carpenter who came to work at home when I was a child in Kerala. Kerala houses are built with wooden rafters, old houses, and with tiles on top. The carpentry is done on the ground, and then the rafters are taken up and knocked together with a hammer. See, it's a very, very mathematically accurate process. The carpenter did not know Pythagoras or any geometrical theory, but knew that if one side of the triangle was 4 and the other 3, the third longer side would be 5. Because I asked him once, how do you do that? So he said, no, if this is 4 and this is 3, that's fine. That's, you just take it proportionally. So I don't claim the same expertise with words that he had with wood, but it's experience that I'm similar to him in that it's experience without the benefit of theories. So you'll have to excuse the narration of my journey through words rather than theory. I go by the ear when in doubt about the choice of a word or the structure of a sentence. If it sounds all right, it is right. The morality of the act of translating itself has often been called into question. There are accusations of misinterpreting, misleading the reader, and so on. The morality of, since it could not be absolutely faithful to the author, to the original, how are we to present it to the public as a true representation? Liars, cheats, traitors, we've all been called all that. There's no end to the opprobrium that is heaped on translators. Things have improved. People like Ratna Books have said they will publish translations and translations only, which was very courageous of them. But then there is still this feeling that there's something slightly shameful about translation. I, of course, deny it strongly. I'm a translator. I think we do very good work. We do very useful work. I didn't set out to translate. I mean, I was working in a bank. Some friends who did not read Malayalam asked me for an English wish they could read a Malayalam novel I was enthusiastic about in English. And so I did it. That was Ashwathama by Madamba Kunyikutan. And Serendipity, a neighbor working in a publishing house, got it published. The fact that I loved languages, I really love languages, not just the writing, like I like listening to languages. It's like music to me. I like their different cadences, their music, the color and texture of words. The whole thing is words have character. So, besides their meaning, I really enjoy that. I don't know if you're aware, but one of the influential Malayalam weeklies when I was growing up had two serial novels. One was from the original Malayalam, and one was a translation from Bengali, Marathi, Hindi, English, Oriya, Tamil, and so on. I read Dracula in Malayalam before I read it in English. And Bram Stoker came later. E.V. Ramakrishnan came first. A.V. Ramakrishnan came first. Thoroughly enjoyed it too. Malayalam has always had plenty of translations from other languages, from Sanskrit, from English, from French, and of course from other Indian languages. The idea of translating is not alien to a Malayali, but I found that an equivalent flow from Malayalam to other languages, especially English, was not available. And there was so much in Malayalam writing that cried out for a larger reading. Uh, it is not necessary in this erudite gathering to talk of the difficulties of translating between two such alien languages, not just the sentence structure, the usual trouble, the kinship terms, the differences between an inflected language and an uninflected one, but also the attitude. Just think of it. Even something as simple as ashes can be bhasmam or the sacred ash to the Indian reader, and to the English reader, it is something for a stray dog to roll in. Ashes are something that a stray dog rolls in. Uh, I remember this phrase from the very first translation I did. ഭസ്മമിട്ട് തേച്ചു മിനുക്കിയ ഓട്ടുവിളക്ക് പോലൊരു പെൺകുട്ടി. I translated it as a girl who shone like a bronze lamp rubbed with ashes. But if you haven't seen a bronze lamp shining quietly, unlike the glitzy brass lamp, how would you know what the girl was like? Even leaving aside the difficulties of language, consonants, there is the fact that there is an additional filter between the writer and the reader. I can only write from my experience, my vocabulary, and my attitudes. I can try to be as true as possible to the original. But I'm not that person who wrote those sentences. I had once translated a poem by the famous Malayalam poet, the late N.N. Kakkar, the title of which is From a Letter to Mr. T.S. Eliot. I won't quote the whole poem, but the end of it, the poet talks of the difficulty of explaining what he's saying to Mr. Eliot. Let me just read the few lines in Malayalam for the sheer pleasure of reading it. Because I like the poet and his poems. Mr. Eliot, താങ്കൾക്കിത് മനസ്സിലാകുന്നുണ്ടാവില്ല. ഉരുകുന്ന അഗ്നിയുടെ കടച്ചിൽ താങ്കൾക്ക് മനസ്സിലാവും. കരിയുന്ന നാഡികളിലൂടെ അമൃതമൊഴുകുന്ന ശാന്തി താങ്കൾക്കറിയാനിടയില്ല. നാം തമ്മിൽ 6000 യോജന അന്തരമുണ്ടല്ലോ. 6000 ജന്മങ്ങളുടെ അന്തരം. ഒരു ഹിമവാന്റെ, ഒരു പ്രണവത്തിന്റെ അന്തരം. And the translation goes like this. Okay. Sorry. After Mr. Eliot, you will not understand this. You can understand the ache of the melting bone, but you cannot understand the peace when nectar flows through burning nerves. There is a distance of 6,000 yojanas between us, the distance of 6,000 births, the distance of a himavan, of a pranava. Now, all these words I've used the same ones, pranava and this thing. But, these are not things that can really be told to a person who's not willing to take the trouble to find out what it is. Um, and this interpretation part of it, that anything comes through the filter of my experience, my reading. The translators, I'm sure both of you will agree, having experience of this, isn't it? I mean, your vocabulary intervenes. It's not the author's vocabulary, it is your vocabulary. What you try is to write in English as near as an English which you presume the author would use. That's all. See, there are so many translations. So, classics have. Kalidasa's Abhijnana Shakuntalam has innumerable translations in Malayalam, just out of curiosity. I had compared the famous stanza that starts Yasyatya Shakuntala. But each author had treated it differently. There were minute differences in the stress given to a word, in the shade of a meaning, even the order of words. So, I mean, like each translator filters the author through his or her experience. And this is where the discussion on the morality or immorality of translation and its value can continue. But I, for one, owe a lot of reading pleasure to the activity of translators. They have given me the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, the Iliad and the Odyssey, Kalidasa, the European poets. Penguin had the series of European poets in translation, which was very good, like Kawafi and Herbert, the Russians, the South Americans, the French. Would you want to be without any of them at whatever cost? Would you like to have missed Hugo and Dostoevsky and Marcus and Borges just because you cannot read the languages they wrote in? So obviously, in spite of the imputed immorality of translation, we don't need these translations. Okay, the full glory of the original is not available, but I would say I'm happy with half a loaf if I can't have the full loaf. And there is another non-literary benefit too, if you don't mind my mentioning. Actually, I picked up the title as Various Universe. So it is in that context that I think that these various universes are open to us through translations. In To Kill a Mockingbird, the author talks of how you understand a person. She says you get into the skin of the person and walk a few steps, and then you understand what that person feels like. Similarly, Mr. Nadeem was saying about, what a useless, what it is to feel a useless person. So when you go enter the mind of a person like that, that you realize what you are doing to a person by calling him useless. So that it enables us to enter worlds. Translations enable us to do just that. It enable us to enter the words, to enter the worlds that the other that otherwise would be strange to us, but for the translation we are reading. Now, when we live the lives of these characters and listen to their conversation, like I often felt that I knew Bengali because I read so many novels from Bengali in translation. Uh, and listen to their conversation, we get an understanding of their motives, the forces that drive them, the forces that make them live the lives they do. And that is no mean advantage. Anything that enables one person to understand another, one people to understand another, one nation to understand another is valuable and has to be nourished. So let's say long live translations. The various universes that exist in isolation can be brought together by the tool of creative writing, fiction, and poetry through the medium of translation. Because I think rather than treatises, it's creative writing that communicates lives. I would like to go to another another side to the activity of translation. It is a preference of many publishers to hide the fact that the book is a translation at all. Very few, with honorable exceptions. Uh, choose to give the name of the translator on the dust jacket. I don't know how it is with your publisher, Mr. That's Ratna, right? Ratna does.
Yep.
Uh,
Yes.
it is also the fact that one more hand was involved in the creation of the book is a shameful secret to be hidden. Of course, I'll take this opportunity to thank Dinesh and Sridhar of Ratna Books, who had the courage to found a publishing house for translations alone and to keep our name, blazoned on the uh, front. I don't know if I should read from the book. Yavanika said to be prepared, but then I leave it to you, Dr. Satish.
Yeah, we'll do that. So thank you very much, Prema, for uh, telling us your credo as a translator. Now, coming to specifically to your book, the bells are
This
ringing
particular
in
book,
Haridwar. Yeah, this is the book. Yeah, the book was originally published in Malayalam, I believe, in 1972.
one
In
of
fact,
them.
it's a collection of one of them,
It's three novellas.
1972.
By a coincidence, it's
Yeah,
a collection of three
yeah,
novellas.
yes. Savitri's Girdle in 1992 and The Naked Lord in 1989. Now, I just wanted to ask you that there is a gap between the original publication in the original language, that is Malayalam, and your translation of it in 2019. So,
Uh,
with the passage of this time, this kind of temporal and a spatial distance, do you think that those the preoccupations of the author at that time and how he's received now, does it still resonate with the readers? I mean,
I
how do
don't
you
know.
account
I'll
for
tell
this?
you. Um, the setting may have changed, but what happens in the bells are ringing in Haridwar have not changed. Has not changed at all because again, it's an existential angst. The protagonist is searching for his personal salvation. The world of Charas and that particular world of 1960, late 60s 70s has changed, but the people, the attitudes, okay, now it may not be someone who's employed by uh, an embassy, but a techie, someone who's living that life, could be for the thing does not change. The man's quest for his own salvation, his own realization does not change. Oddly enough, all three novella, one set in Delhi, two set in Mahi, have this change of the person. The protagonist changes in a lot of ways over the small narration. So I think that does not change. Why is it that we are still able to read old books and where things have changed? I mean, you can read Dickens or someone like that, and still you can read Shakespeare and relate to it. I mean, we've had movies made in the 21st century relying on Shakespeare's themes. Othello has been remade. Macbeth has been remade umpteen number of times. Now, Macbeth is an old story for Shakespeare. So where does the Scottish the Scottish rebellion and the murder and all? But it resonates because the people are the same. The settings might change. You may not have the Scottish castle. There was that Hindi movie. I don't wait. What was it called? Maghul.
Maghul. Maghul.
It is such a recent one, and that's Macbeth. Okay, you don't have the Scottish lord and the king, but then you have the underworld dons fighting it out for
Gone.
a
Yes.
throne, and instead of the witches, you have this chorus of corrupt policemen. So the theme, the story does not change. It's only that the settings of the characters that change. So I think these are books I have liked. So when Mukundan and I sat together, we decided these three fitted together, since all three are searches for redemption in some way. So
Yeah, I find that interesting uh, because the human element is there always, and although
yeah,
the social scenes may change, but essentially the
the
human
background,
element remains, and that's why all these stories that you've been telling about, they have such
yeah,
vast universal appeal. Uh, of course, and then also the kind of pictures that story evokes. You know, the bells are ringing in Hyderabad, that novella. It gives very vivid descriptions of the places, of the temples, of the ghats, you know, of Manasa Devi temple,
yeah.
and so on.
And you really
And they
feel as
can
though you
speak
are
with
moving
you.
with the characters,
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
and
And then
that
I
does
think,
not change.
uh, and to some extent, I would also believe that each retelling or each subsequent translation, I don't think it's a very finished project, right? No translation could be final in that way because there will be tellings of it, there will be retellings of it, and therefore the
Oh yes,
perspectives may change. Also, would you agree with that, Mr. Nadeem?
Yeah, certainly.
Do
I
you
mean,
agree with that,
not
Nadeem, that
only
the translation could be? It could also be a work in progress.
Uh, it should be actually, and like you were saying, Satish, the differences can come with time, with the change in space and the temporal differences. But I think that even when you are moving from one language into another language, uh, the for instance, if I have to talk about Marathi, there is a very distinct readership of Marathi books that likes a certain variety of narration. So there are traditions of storytelling, in Hindi, Marathi, Urdu, I'm sure Malayalam also, and they enjoy a very vast readership. But when you are shifting from one of these Indian languages into a language that belongs to an altogether foreign culture, when you're talking about writing in English, it is a very, very major shift in the even in the taste of the reader. For instance, I know in Marathi there is a big demand for the epic style of narration, overstatements, larger than life depictions, attitudes of hero worshipping, reverence, particularly, and then a lot of subjectivity, sentimentality, and so on. And so there are these authors who understand the pulse of these readers and offer them fare in a manner that resonates with the sensibility of these readers. But it has happened with me that when some of these books have come to me for translation into English, I have realized that while the subjects were interesting, they had a universal appeal, but the style of the narration wouldn't go down well with the readers of English books. Now, here was my existential problem, really. I mean, existentialism requires that you do what you want to do. But how do I change even the tempo, even the texture of the narration? And if I do not do it, I know that what is popular in Marathi is not going to resonate very well with the English reader. The theme is good, the characters are good, the plot is wonderful, but the style of narration, the reverential kind, the going over the top kind, that is not what an English the reader of an English book wants. Good English books are actually marked by understatement, by restraint, by a lot of skepticism, objectivity, obliqueness, and very definitely an aversion to sentimentality. Even in a slurpy writer like Charles Dickens, he doesn't really go overboard like the movies of the 1950s did. They never knew when to stop. That okay, the tragedy is over, the pathos has been done, but they went on squeezing up to the last drop. And this there is a readership in Marathi for sure, in Hindi also, but I don't think that if I were to translate it exactly as it is with the same kind of sentimentality and lachrymose syrupy stuff, it would not have gone down where with the reader. So very often I have got into arguments with the original writer, and there have been times where I've been able to make him compromise a little bit and cut out a bit of what I call the fluff. And he has agreed, but then very often it has happened, look, this is my style, this is what I'm known for. But then I keep telling that person that, look, you are known for this in your language. If you want to be known in the English language, you will need to change your mode of presentation. So these little battles have happened. Sometimes I have won,
You hurt
sometimes
your
I have
ego.
lost. Yeah, and sometimes, now here is a morality issue. And I declare myself as culpable that sometimes I have even colluded with the publisher and asked the publisher to put in his pressure and say, okay, look, this doesn't go for English. So I've used dirty deals, but the intention has been that I want to be loyal to the book rather than to the writer. Now,
Author.
whether that is a morally acceptable thing or no, I don't think I need to dwell much on it. As long as the book is read, it is appreciated, I'm happy. And it has actually happened that there have been arguments, and finally the compromise has been made. And when some of my friends who are readers of English books, they have come back to me and only underlined the problem that I have discussed with the writer. They say, okay, lovely book, nice story, it was a nice page turner, but why did it have to slacken so much? Why did it have to get into so much of idolizing and hero worshipping? Couldn't that have been cut down? So I know that is the perspective with the reader of English books comes. And I, as a translator, have been caught in the cleft stick plenty of times. Sometimes I've managed, sometimes I've not. But I think that when I have not managed, I mean, I don't know whether I'm being cocky, but I think that the book loses its impact in English when a whole lot of this avoidable, stuff is allowed to stay on. I don't know.
Yeah,
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 I
but
don't
there's
face the
one
same
issue.
problems because Malayalam
yeah.
is written very
Ah,
spare sort of language. It is not an
oh,
very
wonderful.
overtly ornamental language, except in the
Yeah,
older things. There I faced because I
yeah,
have done a 100-year-old novel also for the Academy. There it was a
yeah.
major problem. But even
Yes,
then, but
yeah.
there I stuck to the original. I didn't change it much because it was a historical thing. I mean, this was
Correct.
being done as a project of a, historical nature. So it was not meant
Yeah.
really to be a popular book. But otherwise, I find that Malayalam doesn't present that problem. It has the other problem. It tends not to use, like you come, just varu. That's it.
Yeah.
So when you
Yeah.
have to specify who is to come, who is to
Yeah.
go, that sort of
Yeah.
thing. And where
Yeah.
you use one form of verb that I think even all of you would have faced, for the age, depending on the age of the person, that kind of thing. English has no kinship things. You only have
Yeah.
cousins. You don't have, mama three
Yes.
times removed kind of thing. You don't
I
have.
know. Yes.
They're all
Yeah.
cousins.
But
Fortunately, the
there's
book that
something I
is
would like to.
presently under discussion, this boy, Avadhut Dongre, he has not gone into those lachrymose things. So I didn't need to really battle with him at all. It's like with your Malayalam writings, it's very sparse, it's very straight, it's very understated, and that suited me
Yeah.
beautifully.
Most of the books I have,
Yeah, now there
mostly
is
I have done
something.
what I wanted to do. So,
Yeah, there's something I would like to ask both of you. You see, when you talk
yeah.
about Indian writing in English, Now, those who are
Yeah.
writing in English, fiction
Mm.
or non-fiction, when they're writing exclusively in English, they
Mm.
have a, a kind of they're suffering from some kind of anxiety of Indianness, because they have this pressure of homogenizing their experience for the wider global audience. Maybe they are working under the pressures of globalizations or the pressures of English as such. Now, when you come to the Indian
Uh,
writers, when you are translating the texts from Indian languages to English, do you have the same kind of anxiety to cater to your wider readership, and therefore to some kind of a, transcribe in a
no,
way that it also homogenizes, or you try to retain the specificity of the cultures
no.
and the
I
languages?
think personally, I think I try to retain. I mean, I would like my translation to read like an English book, but I would also like the reader to be aware that this is not an original English book. Like when I read the South Americans, when I read Marquez or someone like that, I get a different flavor from ordinary English writing, from English writing. You know, that
Yeah.
it is a translation. You get a different flavor. It's not the same English that an English author would use. There is a difference. I find that in most translations into English also. So I only try. I would like the cadences of my language to go into my writing. I would like them to be aware that this is being spoken, this is being said in a place very far from where I am. That kind of thing. So I
Yeah,
try to
true,
retain.
Prema.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And but after all that, when you read French books, you read Cervantes, and you when you read say Camus and all these guys, they are good enough as standalone books. Dostoevsky
Yeah.
will have the Russian fragrance about it, but when you are reading the
Yeah.
book, it doesn't appear to you as if you are reading you are reading about a different culture, but the presentation, the use of the language is such that you do not feel that you are missing out on anything from the
It does
original.
not. It does not interrupt your appreciation. So that's what I said. It should read like
Absolutely.
an English book that way.
Yes.
I mean, like I
Yes.
wouldn't. But that is mostly by sentence structures and things, and not. I don't change the language much. I try to retain the flavor.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
like to
And when,
retain the rhythm. I do some poetry
yeah.
also, so I feel very thrilled when I've managed to retain the rhythm of the poem.
Yes, of course, of course, of course. So, Satish, you were saying that whether I need to keep the reader in mind. Of course, all the time that I am reading, I have a very distinct image of the kind of person who's reading it, and the person in front of my eyes is the educated Indian reader.
Yeah,
I'm writing for somebody like Prema. I'm writing for somebody like you. I'm writing for somebody like Dinesh and Sridhar. So those are the people in front of me for whom I'm writing, and therefore I can take a lot of liberty with the Indian terminology, and which come like if I have to say the word sasural or bahu or father-in-law, they will know the resonances of the relationships. So this I do. Like Prema was saying, you can't really go on explaining the power balance between a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law. You can't do that. But basically, when I'm writing uh, for the well-versed English reader of English books in India. And I hope that, like the way all of these great writers have communicated, Alexander Dumas has communicated, Cervantes has communicated, I hope that our writing also will be able to communicate in some way or the other, even to people for whom the Indian culture is a foreign culture. It does communicate. You have this writer called Alexander McCall Smith.
yeah,
Now he's of course not translating, but when you read him, you can actually smell the native land everywhere. So the reader extends himself, stretches himself, wants to reach out and try and visualize the kind of world that the writer and then the translator have created. Yeah.
So
And
your
if
fidelity
I'm
is,
willing to, if I'm
yes.
willing to, sorry to interrupt, but then if I'm willing to take the effort to read something and understand some other culture, I pay the compliment to my reader of thinking that he
Yes.
or she is willing to take
Yes.
the same effort.
Absolutely, you have to respect the reader's intelligence and resourcefulness.
Yeah. So, Mr. Nadeem,
So,
an English that is as close to English writing with resonances of the language we took it from, right?
Yeah.
We write in, we try
Y-
to
you know
write in that.
One of the again, while discussing problems of the translator, one of the biggest problems that I've faced is when in the Marathi books that I have done, when there is somebody who speaks very bad quality of Marathi.
Yeah,
So the writer, by using that quality of Marathi, is very clearly sketching out a certain character and wants the reader to carry a certain image of that person. So if you don't mind, can I read out a small part from which is not from these books, but I tried to sort of put across the character of a person whose Marathi is very bad. So, if with your permission, can I read a small part of?
yes, yes.
Satish, yeah.
Which is that?
Yeah.
Yes.
It is the
Which is
third
the
book
book you're
of
reading
Avadut
from?
that I was talking about.
Okay.
It's called Leaf, Water, and Flow. So it forms a trilogy with the other two novellas that have actually come into print in this particular book. But this sort of exemplifies the problems that I face when I'm trying to to picturize, to sketch out a person who is seriously uneducated even in the language of the original narration. May I then, please?
Yes, go ahead. Sure, sure.
Yeah, okay. So this is a character called Lataka, and Lataka is she belongs to the Gond tribe. The Gonds are not Marathi speaking people. They are completely tribal people. In fact, a lot of these Gonds live in the Gadchiroli area, which is a Marxist, Naxalite hotspot of India. So here is this Lataka, who has been presented in this Marathi book, and this is how I have tried to capture her inadequate control even of Marathi. This is how it goes. How you write my story now, huh? I only know Gondi, you only know Marathi. My Hindi not good, your Hindi not good also. So how we do? I only tell you, and you only well, I from that village, my man also from that village. My name Latakka. I see this jeep, this building first time. There in village, when sound of jeep come, there no, that time police come. So police come. Jeep come mean police come. It like this now. Look, government say make road for progress, but why we let road come in our village? Not let. Jeep will come on road. Jeep mean police. So you want to make road for police. How this will do, Dada? Now you tell me this will do to my brother, this police, this big rope. So they hang my brother by this big rope, put him backside of jeep on ground, and they run jeep fast. So sometime tree, sometime big stone. So like this, they kill my brother. He died there like this. So why we want road come, huh? Just saying something.
Yeah, so
Malayalam
what
has
I try to
one
illustrate
lovely
from that is,
translation.
Sorry?
what
Okay.
I understand from this is that a translator should not rewrite in the sense of ascribing a new meaning to the original text, because certain
Absolutely.
expressions and certain nuances should be conveyed
Yes.
exactly as they are. At the same time, the
Yes.
translator has to negotiate a balance, because he has to
Yes.
maintain a certain fidelity to the author's text and also to the expectations of the readers. And therefore, this delicate
Yes.
negotiation that he has to do, well, I think
Yes.
that's very significant.
So I had to
Yeah.
seriously fracture
Uh,
the English language, as you could see.
yes, exactly.
From the
Prema, would
Malayalam,
you like to read?
yeah,
Sorry.
Would you
I
like to
would
read
like to.
a passage
Mukundan,
from "The Bells Are Ringing in Haridwar"? Yes.
I'm actually reading from one of the other novella because I want to read the Malayalam and a little bit, just a small para. പടിഞ്ഞാറേക്കൊഴുകുന്ന പുഴവെള്ളം ഉരുകിയൊലിക്കുന്ന ലാവ പോലെ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. സൂര്യൻ എരിഞ്ഞടങ്ങി അല്പനേരത്തിനുള്ളിൽ കല്ലിശ്ശേരി മങ്ങിയിരുളും. എല്ലാ ചലനങ്ങളും നിൽക്കും. അശരണനായ തമ്പുരാൻ ചിറകറ്റു വീണ ഒരു പറവയെപ്പോലെ വെട്ടുകുഴിയിൽ കൂനിക്കൂടിയിരുന്നു. ഉടുതുണിയില്ലാതെ എങ്ങനെ വീട്ടിലേക്ക് പോകും? ക്ഷുദ്രപ്രാണികളുടെ കുത്തും കടിയുമേറ്റ് അദ്ദേഹത്തിന് ശരീരമാകമാനം ചൊറിയുകയും പുകയുകയും ചെയ്തു. മനസ്സിലും നീറ്റലാണ്. വെട്ടുകുഴിയിൽ കഴിച്ചുകൂട്ടുന്ന രണ്ടാമത്തെ രാത്രിയാണിത്. പരവശനായ തമ്പുരാന് ഊണും ഉറക്കവുമില്ലാതെ ഇനിയും ഇങ്ങനെ ഒളിച്ചിരിക്കുവാൻ വയ്യ. എന്തു മാർഗങ്ങൾ ഉപയോഗിച്ചാലും ശരി, ഈ രാത്രി ഇവിടെ നിന്നും പുറത്തു കടന്ന് മാളികയിൽ കരപറ്റണം. അതിന് ഈശ്വരൻ ഒരു പോംവഴി തോന്നിക്കട്ടെ. By midday, the quarry and surroundings were deserted. The Theyyams did not dance during the day on the first day of the festival. Few people went to the temple because of that. When he saw nobody on the path, the Tambran became hopeful. Uh, he parted the overgrown creepers and stood on his toes to peer outside. There was not a soul within sight. The whole place was in the grip of a heat-induced lassitude. Calling upon the gods to protect him, Tamburan slowly pulled himself out of the quarry. The mimosa shut their eyes in shyness when he came near them. His legs ached and burnt from the scratches from plants. Once out of the quarry, he hid behind the tree at the side. He squatted behind the trunk and looked around. Nothing living moved anymore. Folding his hands and praying once more, Tamburan came out from behind the tree and took a couple of steps forward. I think what I would like, I mean, if there is time, uh, I would like to read a small poem where this cadence. Oh no, I think I'll leave it for the time being. I think I'll leave it because uh, I mean, it's not from. Would you like me to read something from? You were talking of the Haridwar step, this thing, no, the
Haridwar,
temples.
yeah. Yeah, maybe a brief passage from that.
Ramesh walked from one ghat to another, as though he was walking from one kalpa to another. He forgot that there was a world beyond these ghats. He was not conscious of time or place. He walked forward with fever in his soul. A cow that was wandering under the paudis or ghats had a number of colored pieces of cloth wrapped around its body. There were bells round its neck. The white cow wandered among the mendicants and the pilgrims like a soul that had achieved salvation. Ramesh's mind yearned painfully for the purity of soul that the white cow had attained. Sins were burning in him. Weren't those the pyres of sins that burnt in his sunken eyes? They left their slippers outside and walked to the Brahmakund. The Paudis or Paides had been built by Vikramaditya. There were many pilgrims bathing at the ghat. Leaves of the sacred bay, a wood apple tree, and flowers of different kinds were lying in the water. Pujas were going on in the temples that crowded together in the water and on the shore. A sacrificial fire burned in the island in the middle of the river. Sannyasis sat around the fire throwing ghee and incense and reciting the Gayatri mantra. The mountains darkened in the distance, red drained out from the sky. Aratis, prayer ceremonies with lighted lamps and incense, blazed in the river. Devotees were floating leaf platters with flowers and small flames. The pilgrims who had gathered thickly on the shores pleaded for succor and recited the names of gods. Their voices lingered like a lament on the shores. The puja was over. Thousands of leaf held flames floated down the river. The priests who came out of the temples held high flames in their hands and went down the steps of the ghat. They stood in a row on the last step, with flames held above their heads, eyes open towards the sky. Bells rang continuously from the innumerable temples of Haridwar. The sound of conches from the temple echoed over the river. Some of the pilgrims were beating their breasts and crying and fell unconscious. Ramesh stood there stunned. His ears were filled with the sounds of conches and bells that swept in like waves. The light of the flames that were held up towards the sky turned him blind. He was burning like a sacrificial fire himself. The flames in the temples ran out of oil. The aratis in the river floated away. The ghats were getting deserted.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
I
Thank
think
you.
in these three novella, the
Yeah,
characters are trying to find redemption,
yeah,
breaking out of the mold of stereotyping
yeah, breaking
and
out of
these
the mold that they had left.
dichotomies. Yeah, and then
And
breaking away from these dichotomy of morality and immorality, as you might say.
yeah, the straight jackets that one is brought up in.
Yes,
That is-
and Nadeem, in your book, uh, you have also very wonderfully translated from Tukaram.
Oh, yes. Yeah, yeah. Would you want me to read some of
How
that?
how do you?
Yeah,
No, I
okay.
don't think we have much time left now. How do you connect
Okay.
that to the protagonist who is trying to
Uh,
find his
no,
life
here,
meaningful or
uh,
otherwise?
see, if you read the book, all of these events, episodes have come so very casually that it hardly looks like a very deliberate insinuation, but it very much is. Because at the end of the day, I think this is what the philosophy of the protagonist, finally settles down to. Do your thing, do not worry about consequences.
Yeah,
Just
that's
be what you want to be, and leave the rest to God, in Tuka's words. That it and it has been brought in so very casually that you hardly notice that this was a very deeply, planned insertion. This is how this boy's mind works. The writer Avadhoot Dongre. Yeah, I mean they are beautiful
nice.
pieces, and I really loved translating Tukaram into English. In fact, I had an argument with a translator. That person wanted me to do it in the modern idiom, but then I thought, hello, Tukaram is a good 6 centuries, 7 centuries ago. I can't really be talking, in hey and high terms when I'm talking of him. So I did continue with the older, variety of English. So I don't know if there is time I can read out a poem, or if there isn't, we'll move on.
Talking
Yeah,
about this
Satish is
modern idiom,
yeah,
yes, I'm reminded of U.R. Ananthamurthy, who wrote his
yeah,
Sanskara in Kannada, which was
yeah.
published in 1965, and the book was then
Okay,
translated into English by A.K. Ramanujan in
okay,
1976. Now, it is only
okay,
when the book was translated into English that the book was received in a different context, the context of modernity. So, does the
okay.
translation into English of an Indian language give it a certain context of modernity?
Yes, I suppose it all depends on, first of all, what the writer's intention is. I mean, I as a translator have to go by whatever the writer intended, first place. And like Prema was saying, at the end of the day, it is you and your vocabulary and your sensibilities to this language and that language, which ultimately ask you to make the choice. In the matter of the Tukaram and the Namdev poems that I did, I certainly wanted the reader to know that this is a very ancient teacher talking, and I couldn't possibly have trivialized it. In my opinion, that would have been trivializing by using the late 20th century idiom.
and the ideas also would have sounded slightly odd in the modern idiom.
Yeah, yeah, I would think so. I would think so. I don't know whether I have the time to read out, say, about 5, 6 lines of this Namdev poem that I translated. If I have the time and if I have your permission, I'd love to read it out.
Yeah, I think you go ahead with it.
Okay, all right, here we go. So the line goes: water bubbles as you watch, in the blink of an eye do vanish. Water bubbles as you watch, in the blink of an eye do vanish. So doth the world as you behold. It ends with nothing left to hold. As jugglers' tricks thin air become, so verily doth the world. No good, says Nama, there resides. Transient are its truths. These were the few lines.
Lovely,
Yeah.
really lovely.
So
Thank
I'm
you.
glad you had
I
the
think
time to
Thanks a
that's a
lot.
read
wonderful
them.
note to wind up our conversation.
Yeah,
Uh,
Thank you. Yeah.
it has been absolutely delightful talking to both of you, and
Yes. Ditto here.
I'm sure the listeners have enjoyed this conversation as much I have.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Nadeem and
Thank
Prema.
you. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Prema.
Thank
thank
you.
you, Satish.
Thank you,
And
Sridhar.
thank you, Nadeem, especially for this last
Satish.
poem, which is lovely.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks,
Thanks a
both
lot.
of you.
Bye.
And Yavanika and
Bye.
Niti also, who
Oh,
organized this
yes.
whole
Yes.
thing. And
And
Ranjan,
Ranjan. Yes.
who's put up with
Thanks a
our
lot.
technical disabilities.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.